do you have any advice for industry on how to add value to contracting officers in the usual dealings with contracting officers?
Yeah, I think I would say, and again, my experience mostly from a PM, but I would say just make sure they know who you are and make sure they know what you're qualified to do. I know that one of the things I'm attempting to do is answer as many RFIs as I can. And, I've talked with some of the folks in industry and in the government. And, in fact, this was briefed at a couple of conferences I've been at recently where the procurement folks have said, look, we put out RFIs because we want to know what's going out there. So this is your opportunity. If they put it in RFI and they ask you what vehicles you're authorized to use, tell them. Right? Because otherwise they may put something, on a vehicle when the RFP comes out. It might be on a vehicle that you don't have. Now you're having to go team up, which is fine. I realize that's a big part of the business. But, make sure that, I would answer every RFI that came out. I would, it's not going to hurt you. And they come out fast, right? 48 to 72 hours sometimes they want a turnaround. So my recommendation is to get your stuff ready to get it back on a quick turnaround.
Any advice on, because sometimes you see the RFI, the source is sought, you respond, and then nothing happens, at least for some time. Yeah. How to build that relationship quickly? Do you have any thought on that?
Well, I would pick up the phone. All right, man, I hate phones, man, which is probably really bad for my new line of business here, but I'll pick it up when I have to, and I always take yours, though, Ezekiel, so. But,
sorry, I would what?
I would always take your calls. But
No, I think you're great with well, I don't know. So, yeah, I agree with you. It is, believe it or not, it is, I was listening the other day to some sort of a singer she was saying she was always nervous when she was going to sing in a scenario. I guess making phone calls is the same thing. No matter how long experience you have, it's always something, right? Nobody loves to make phone calls to people that you don't really know, and even less to, quote unquote, sell them something, right?
Right.
But I think it's important to make phone calls, and when you respond to an RFI or a sources sought, to just pick up the phone and try to add value right there, right? Sometimes you have to find a reason. The way I think about a reason to call these people is to help them procure better, to help them with suggestions on how to improve the RFI. Any thoughts on how to try to move before the RFI? How to be able to identify an RFI that's about to happen? You have any? Is that possible at all?
Well, the one thing I recommend to folks is they keep their eye on APFS, right? These government agencies are actually mandated to share their procurement forecasts. I think it's August every year that they're supposed to do it. Now, do they all do it? I don't know. Because I only know DHS, and I know that they are really, really serious about it, and they always do.
They're awesome.
So others, I've heard that maybe they don't. But here's the thing: if it comes around that time of year and you don't see anything from your target agency, that's when I would reach out and say, hey guys, what's your forecast for this year? Because that's really where, one of the things I'd really like to get into with Rely is to really identify and position those long-term acquisitions, right? Where I can get in there and, get some white papers in front of the COs and hopefully they can, if you can find out who the PM is, get it in front of them and say, hey, here's sort of things we're thinking about in this space. It doesn't have to be specific to an actual acquisition. And certainly, it's depending on what time in the acquisition life cycle, it's too late to directly send things like that. But you do want to let them know that, hey, we're thinking about this too, and here's a couple of ideas about how we think we might solve this. Because the one thing is, I've been doing this business a long, long time, and I sort of have in mind what I want done, and I'm thinking some cases was pretty forward-thinking over my career. Never was able to get the funding to do it all, and I'm not done yet. I want to help the government through contracting. But you can't know everything, and everybody's different, and you need this wide view of opinions and experiences. And there's nothing more delightful to me as a Fed, when I was a Fed, to have someone come up with a new idea that I hadn't even thought of, and like, wow, that's amazing. That would have a big impact. But you can't know it, because I guarantee you Feds are head down into their day-to-day, trying to manage those conflicting requirements of all these meetings and all the things they're trying to get done. And, every Fed comes out, it's a little bit of an anti-agile pattern, I think, and I railed against it till the day I left. But, they come out every single year with 3 major goals, each of which has 5 to 10 subset goals underneath them. And they got to get that done with their teams by the end of the year. And each individual gets that same number of goals for the performance work plans. And they're just cranking on that stuff. And anything else is they have to do all this other stuff, but it's just delaying them.
So you mentioned white papers to CEOs. Am I wrong, or, what are your thoughts on white papers? Who's the audience of white paper? I was thinking that really the audience are the PMs. But you just said white paper CEOs. Are the white papers directed to CEOs, to PMs, or both? And how do you structure the white paper so you reach both audiences?
Yeah, so absolutely going to the PMs. Unfortunately, many people don't know who that PM is, and they're not as well represented from the agency as the CEO. You always know who the CEO is, or often in like for specific areas. And most of the CEOs I've spoken with these days, or procurement folks, will get that to the right PMs internally if they don't know. So that's absolutely written towards the PM. And it's basically to show your thought leadership in a space, right? And maybe even stuff they hadn't thought about. And by the way, white papers directly are one thing. There's also LinkedIn. I see a lot of people putting things up there too. What you have to sort of keep in mind, though, if you do it that way, you're letting the world know. And then someone else may take your idea and build on it and resubmit, right? So keep that in mind.
Gotcha. But, so you mentioned, so you said the practicality is that the industry is gonna send the white paper to the CEO because it is easier to know who the CEO is as opposed to know who the PM is. So you send it to the CEO. You can trust the CEO is gonna send it to the PM. Any advice on how to have the CEO introduce the PM?
Well, I mean, I would simply ask to request, because it's interesting to me. Here's the thing: I never knew about it when I was a PM. But now I'm on the industry side. Everybody's saying, we would love to introduce you to our PMs. We encourage our PMs to talk. And I'm like, well, that sounds great. But if anybody who can make that mechanism work better, that would be great. And, and I was the process guy when I was at DHS. And I'm actually bothering my current teammates trying to build new processes here. Because to me, the way things, you can always tailor them, but you don't want to make it a repeatable process. So everything I do where I know where I need to go next, and I won't let anything fall through the cracks.
Sorry, I didn't get it. What is that you didn't know? But we're talking about having the CEO introduce the PM. You're saying that when you were the PM, you didn't know. Sorry, I didn't get it.
No, when I was a PM, there wasn't a clear process for folks to come and talk to me about certain things. Some did, a lot of people. And it's a relationship business. And the one thing that I've really, thrills me now is that I had really good relationships with industry even when I was in the government. And I was actually, folks have made kind comments and given me a little plaque about that over the years where I was approachable, right? But it's just a matter of getting out there and hearing what's going on. So many of my teaming partners now I've known for decades because I've known them even when I was a Fed. So that's been very helpful in my career transition.
So what would be an approach?
It wasn't a common thing where folks could just go find the PM. The CIOs would get a lot of, here's the challenge, right? I know you can find all the CIO names. You can try to get on their calendars, right? But the CIOs aren't really given the word. They're going to give you their broad overview. If you can get that meeting, and they're going to give you the broad overview of what they want to do. They're going to give you their strategic plan, which, by the way, you can go read. The DHS strategic plan that we published just before the fiscal year is a masterwork where they're trying to go, and I can guarantee you, everybody, that is exactly what they're doing for that particular agency, so can concentrate on AI, CX, things like that. But then, the people who built, split the contracts are PMs like a level or 2 or 3 down from the CIO or the CTO, whomever you're able to get that meeting with. So identifying those folks is a heck of a challenge. Yeah. That would be something, that would be really helpful for industry. And I always, the challenge we would have with, meeting, I think often, I don't mind when I was a Fed, so consider the workload that I just described for your average Fed. Now, they're going to make a decision on whether they want to talk to you based on the perceived value of how this new solution relative to what they're doing. And if they don't have any money, there's often no time to even talk. That was the biggest challenge I had at headquarters. I was always open to talking to someone. I always carved out a little bit of time to have industry come in. And in fact, Tom Bold, who was a wonderful gentleman who has been at DHS since day one, and actually runs their industry outreach program. And you work with Tom at headquarters to get in front of folks, and he manages all of OCIO. He works out of the CTO shop, but he sets up industry engagement for all of OCIO at DHS. But the challenge is, it's got to be good. It's got to be something that really is going to get somebody's attention. And a pro tip, if you're spending, typically they start out with 30-minute meetings. So if you're spending the first 10 minutes introducing your leadership staff and showing slides with all the people you've worked with in the past and all the icons, you've just wasted 33% of your pitch time. So
what is your advice for meeting with federal end user? Let's say that happens. You send a white paper to the CEO. The CEO is happy. The CEO makes an introduction to the PM. You finally get the meeting. What is your advice for that meeting?
Use the barbecue principle. I'm modifying this from former CIO Luke McCormack, with whom I've worked at ICE and DHS. But he says it somewhat differently. But I'm like, barbecue. Be bold, be brief, then be quiet. Because it's a conversation. Don't make this a lecture, right? And send a read-ahead. Send a read-ahead deck. Some people have questioned, well, should I send a read-ahead? Maybe they're just going to look me up on the web before the meeting. And I'm like, I guarantee you the Fed doesn't have time for that. Send a read-ahead. And, depending on, the Fed, and I can tell you the former deputy CIO was famous for this at DHS. She was like, okay, day one, okay, I know who you are. I saw the deck. Let's go to page 5. She was already ready with the questions she had based on the deck you sent, right? And that's going to maximize your time with the senior leaders.
So what you're saying is the read ahead is what you're going to. So if you have some slides for the meeting, send the slides ahead of the call. Yep. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. In fact, the former deputy CIO would not take a meeting without a read ahead.
Who's that? So Beth Capello?
It was Beth, yeah, and who's just retired, and a wonderful person, very strong, very tough. But fair leader. I've worked with her for 22 years. We knew each other from the very beginning of DHS. I worked with her 3 different times over our careers at INS and then DHS.
I love it. Bill, this is so good. So advice is, guys, you have a meeting with the PM, you have a meeting with the CIO, you have a meeting with whoever, a guy with a problem to solve, a goal to achieve, a risk to mitigate or diminish, send the slides ahead of the call. That's a positive because the person may take a look and it will show up with their mind a little bit more prepared. Any other advice for meetings with end users?
Well, know why you're here. I mean, nobody's got time to hear about your company history. No one cares what year you were founded. That's all, if you feel like you have to put that in the deck, stick it in the backup, right? What we need to know, what's really going to help you is understanding what we need in advance. And it's not hard to find. I don't know about everywhere else. For DHS, the strategic plan is out there. We are sharing what we need and what I say we a lot because I was there a long time. But DHS is sharing what they need, and if you come in there unaware of their needs and how your solution synthesizes and can help meet those needs, then you're wasting a golden opportunity for 30 minutes of FaceTime, with a senior leader who have real impact, right?
Any advice for the white papers, the structure of them? Have you ever, when you were there, received a white paper that blew your mind and said, wow, this is so awesome?
I think really getting down, probably very similar to understand what we're looking for and try to tailor what you're doing to, and it may be such a crazy new thing, although these days, with AI, you never know what's coming up, but it has to be something towards what we're trying to do, because no matter how cool it is, if it doesn't help us meet our mission, or I should say our again here, but DHS's mission, and keep in mind, that's what, the mission of DHS is. There's thousands of web pages out there to tell you exactly what DHS is going for. And of course, you want to target down to a specific sub-agency or component. That's you can find out what their mission is. And you need to speak their language. You need to understand, here's another thing I'll tell you guys, right? You need a sales guy or gal. I've been briefed when I was a Fed, and they brought people in, brilliant engineers that never should have left the server room, right? Should never have been in a meeting room with a senior executive, because they got spun up on the intricacies of their solution. They loved the solution more than they loved my business need, right? And it's like they're going in and telling me all these things, and they're just going on and on and on. And you sit there with, there was a sales guy that kind of started the meeting, got us in the door. The engineer was the only guy that really knew it. So your salespeople need to understand the basics, because you got to break it down. I'm 65, right? The vast majority of my late career has been making sure the suits understood what the texts were saying, and I was that middle bandpass filter, if you will, going back to old electronics, right? They otherwise couldn't tell. They were talking right past one another. And if you let that happen, if you can't answer the simple questions, then it's not going to go well for you. You're just going to have wasted some time.
Gotcha. So advice for meeting is don't get, I guess the technical person can be there, but the director of the orchestra of the meeting is the salesperson who is a little bit more focused on the needs of the feds and the end user. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, that should be the person. I mean, you can't go into the weeds on it because you're not going to get enough time anyway to understand that. And the other thing I would say is, this is back in the good old 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Listen, right? If the old adage, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. A lot of people come in and just, wow, crap, I got 30 minutes, I gotta cram this pitch in, man. And the thing is, first thing I would ask, just like in that famous books, like go and say, listen, we've looked at what just wanted to start out. What do you perceive your needs are? Because that might give you some gold right there to start building your pitch around. And otherwise, you might be way off here in left field talking about something.
They don't care.
By the time you're done, you've wasted 5 minutes, and then they want to pull you back in another direction. And you've driven 20 miles down the wrong road, and now they got to pull you back 20 miles and send you the 5 miles in the right direction that you should have been going in the first place. And all you had to do is kind of listen a little bit before you got started. So, that's the thing about a pitch deck, right? Here's sort of what we want to go for. You do the best you can with that, but don't get so married to the deck. If you send it as a read ahead, they've already seen it, so they've got it. And maybe they only took 10 minutes before the meeting. Who knows? Right? But that doesn't mean you can't say, listen, our capabilities are in there. We got some really exciting things to show you, but first I'd like to, kind of hear and maybe they don't want to share, but and they'll let you know. No, we don't. No, we're good. Just we've seen the deck. Go ahead and go.
I have a silly question.
You got to tailor it. And you got to be sensitive, right? You got to listen and kind of pick up the social clues on what you think they want.
I have a silly question, and then I will ask you about Relay, and about any advice for federal employees moving to the industry. But before that, I have a silly question. How many slides should a presentation for a CIO or for an end user have in your mind? How many slides are we talking about?
I would target 10 tops. And I'm talking about with everything, with backups. You can, maybe, so really think about it. Mostly you're going to get a 30-minute pitch. You take half of that is going to be your time, really, with all the back and forth. And you want a lot of time for Q&A, because if they're asking, the worst thing you want is they got no questions, say thank you. Now that's not good. You want to hear some engagement and some back and forth. So, it's short. You need to be able to get to it. So don't waste a lot of space. If you want to put the company history, it's impressive. But look, wow, we look at all these agencies, and everybody likes to put the little icons of the various federal agencies and all the big Fortune 500 companies and everything. Nobody cares. That's them. This is us.
Right.
Here's what I need. And I get that. But really, how many folks have not done that? Right? A couple. There's obviously having past performance is important, right? But that's really not for the initial presentation.
But don't you think that gives credibility if you say, I am this company and I supported all these agents? If you don't say that, you don't have credibility. So are you saying...
but it doesn't have to be your first 2 or 3 slides, right? Yeah,
so what do you think?
Bob, built the company and from his basement, and we kind of.
Oh yeah. That's a waste. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Well, put it in there as just say, hey, listen, we've worked with a ton of Fortune 500 companies, ton of other agencies. That's in the backups. You get a chance to take a look at that. Great. Now you've just taken 10 seconds. You set that stage, and then it's part of your.
So what do you think should be the first few slides? What's the concept of the first few slides?
I think we've looked at your strategy for the next couple of years. We're really excited that we think we got a technology or a service that fully aligns with that, and we'd love to share with you how we can help you meet your mission.
Gotcha.
And that this next couple of slides is going to talk to that. That, to me, I would be, let's go.